Welcome into OutKick, the show. I appreciate all of you hanging out with me as we are rolling through the Monday edition of the program. Still a bit jet lagged. Amazing trip to Israel. I will talk about that in a moment. Also, tons of other stories to hit. But in the meantime, I want to tell you, make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. Prize Picks, the best way in over 30 states to have some fun. California, Florida, Georgia, Texas. You can win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Make your picks in under a minute. Turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Discounts, lots of awesomeness. And join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, plus $30 million plus in rewards during Pixmas. Download the app today. Use code OutKick to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code OutKick. After you play your first $5 lineup, you will get $50. Prize Picks. Run your games. Again, code OutKick on prizepicks.com for $50. We got a lot of different stories to get to. But before I do, I just want to say something about the trip I just took to Israel. I was gone all last week to Israel. I'm going to write a long-form piece on it. I'd never been to Israel before. I toured the country from north to south. I went to Lebanon. Saw all of the awfulness that has happened there. I went down to the kibbutzes where they were attacked on October 7th. I talked to people who were there on that day of the attack, and it was just an incredible experience. And there were a couple of things that particularly stood out to me, and there were many things. I was there all week, and but I went to the Nova Festival site. For those of you who are not familiar, the Nova Festival was a place where thousands of young Israelis, really people from all over the area, went to go celebrate music. And on October 7th, it's kind of like a Bonnaroo or a Coachella or a big music festival of that sort, except in Israel. On October 7th, Hamas terrorists attacked the Nova Festival and killed over 400 people. And as I was walking around the Nova Festival, I couldn't help but think about the experience of those individuals there. These are kids, by and large. We're talking about 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, young people who had gone to a music festival. I bet almost every single one of you have gone to a music festival at some point in your life. And over 400 of them were killed in cold blood because they were Jewish. I believe that Nova site is going to end up being a place where people go for hundreds of years to experience what real anti-Semitism looks like. And one of the things that I kept hearing from so many different people was they hoped that we were past the era of something like that occurring. And the fact that it did occur means that everybody who's talked about being on the right and wrong side of history really hasn't contemplated that much evil still exists in this world. And as I walked around Nova and looked, they have all this. It's sort of just a raw wound that exists in Israel right now. October 7th was their 9/11, and except imagine if hundreds of people had been taken hostage on 9/11 as well, and many of those people were still held hostage, which is the situation that exists in Israel right now. But as you walked around, many of the people that were taken hostage there at Nova. As you walked around and looked at all those young people that were murdered because they were Jewish, it's difficult. It really is, because so many of us, if you're around my age, were raised on being told about the Holocaust and what that experience was like for people who lived through it. And on October 7th, it was the deadliest day for Jewish people since the Holocaust. And I think that for hundreds of years, people will be going to that Nova Festival site talking about what occurred there. But right now, it's still so raw. It's only been 14 months. There is no official memorial set up. Instead, it felt like every one of the victims there basically has a little placard that the family members have designed with an image, picture of the person who was killed. And on one side, they have a Hebrew description of it. On the other side, they have an English description of that person. And one of the particularly chilling aspects of Nova was many parents, friends, and family members were able to be texting with the person who ended up being killed or kidnapped, including one individual that I met with. His son was taken hostage at Nova. And he said he had been texting with him. I talked to the dad, and he said he'd been texting with him and telling him, hey, you need to get away from there. There's terrorists that are coming. And they had many of you probably have this turned on your phone for your friends or your family members where you can see where they're physically located. And the dad told me it's been over 430 days in captivity. His son has turned 21 and now 22 in captivity. And you can imagine what a dad or a mom looks like when their son has been in captivity for 430 some odd days. They can't sleep. If you are a parent, I can only imagine how awful that experience would be. He said the last contact that they had with their son was on the Find My Phone app. He could suddenly see his son's phone moving rapidly in the direction of Gaza. And it crossed the border, and then it vanished. And he was texting initially with his son saying, no, you're going the wrong way. And then he had to start to hope that someone had just stolen his son's phone, and it went right into Gaza, and he hasn't had any contact with his son in over 430 days since. That happened at Nova. I talked to a mom, and I talked to a lot of people, and I'm going to write about this, but I want you to hear it from me also, video and audio-wise. Talked to a mom who had her third child on October 6th, and she woke up in the hospital on October 7th with her baby there in the hospital and became aware that all of the terror attacks had begun. She started texting her husband, and she became aware that Hamas was in their kibbutz, in the neighborhood, basically the commune where they lived, and that there were people being murdered. Her mom and her husband were there in that commune. People were being murdered all through there. She was texting with her husband. He didn't have a gun in the house. He was standing with a butcher knife by the door, ready to defend their two young children with the best weapon that he could find in the house. And as he was there with that weapon in the house, there were no police coming, no military coming. This young mom who just had her third baby was in the hospital, and she was worried that the only thing left of her family was going to be she and that baby. She called her brothers, who were IDF members, and she said, you have to get there. They got their guns. They got in their car. They drove as fast as they could to the kibbutz. They got there, were able to save the husband and the children. They went to go find her mom. They found her mom dead, bullets riddled. The mom said that she was nervous because her mom wasn't responding to the text. At least her husband was continuing to respond to the text. Found her mom, bullet-riddled body, grandma, 65 years old. And when they turned over her body, she was holding a picture of her grandchildren. That was why she was there visiting them. That mom that just had the baby on October 6th, that was in the hospital on October 7th, 14 months ago, when I talked to her, she carried a gun on her hip. I asked her why. She said because since that moment, she hasn't gone anywhere without her gun. Because she doesn't know when Hamas might come again. And if they do come, she wants to be armed and ready for them. It's a mom of 3. I went to Nir Oz, which is one of the kibbutzes that was most savagely attacked. Stood on a patio alongside of one of the survivors looking out over the Gaza area. There's about a mile of farmland between their kibbutz and the Gaza Strip. And we were on a concrete porch of what had been a home that was burned and destroyed on that day, and the people who lived there were murdered. And we were talking about what they did that day. All of those homes have bomb shelters. And on 6:30 a.m. on that day, that Saturday, they all were notified that there were rocket attacks coming and that they needed to go into the bomb shelter. Then in many parts of this area near Gaza, all of a sudden Hamas got inside and started massacring people. And what they would do is, in some of those homes, they lit them on fire because they wanted to force the people who were in those bomb shelters out because of the fire so that they could murder them when they came outside. And I stood outside of one home where the mom and dad gave their lives by the door. Their bodies were bullet riddled. And their 3 kids died of smoke inhalation after Hamas lit the home on fire. It's eerie to see these communities. There's a stillness to them. They're frozen in time. And as a guy who loves sports, some of the images that stood out to me from this community: soccer ball untouched on the patio, the porch of a home where everyone inside had been murdered. They have elementary schools inside of these little communities, untouched, everything there since the October 7th terror attack. They have basketball hoops where the basketball basically hasn't moved since the October 7th terror attacks. If you had trampolines, like many of us did, trampolines untouched by a kid's foot since they were murdered on October 7th. You really have an opportunity to stare into the face of evil. And I think it's profoundly important to speak out about evil when we see it. If Israel put down every weapon in its country tomorrow, the country wouldn't exist within a week. If every country that hates Israel put down its weapons, there would be peace in the Middle East. And I mentioned weapons. One of the things that was stunning to me was, as I walked through the country, they basically have mandatory military service for men and women, young kids, when they turn 18 years old. Everybody goes into the IDF. And seeing all those young people with rifles slung over their shoulders, with pistols on their hips, willing to die for their country at 18 years old, I couldn't help but compare it with the 18-year-olds in the United States on schools like Columbia and UCLA's campus from New York to LA, who showed up to advocate and support Hamas and Palestine in the wake of the October 7th terror attacks. And the dichotomy between young Israelis standing up to evil, to murder based on religion, based on ethnicity, with our moronic American college kids with privileges the likes of which have never existed in the history of the world, being unable to tell the difference between good and evil, is a profound difference. And I couldn't stop thinking about that dichotomy as I traveled all throughout Israel. So again, I'm going to write on it. But I thought it was important to see with my own eyes, to share the stories that I experienced, and to speak to what previously I had reacted to based on just seeing videos, just reading articles, to see it with my own eyes. It wasn't some vacation where I'm hanging out on the beach. I mean, I was working 16-hour days. I was doing Clay and Buck over there. It was a long trip to Israel, but I'm very glad that I went, because I think what I learned was incredibly important. So I wanted to share that with you. I'll write about it at some point in the near future when I get the time. It's chaotic, as I'm sure for many of your schedules, with the kids are running around. We got exam schedule in the Travis household, and there are a lot of fun and festive events that are going on associated with Christmas and the holiday season coming on, New Year's. But I do think it's important to realize that good and evil still exist. And in my opinion, Israel is clearly standing on the side of good, and they're being attacked by many different evil forces. And I want to make sure that I don't forget about everything that's going on there. Okay, much less significant than everything associated with Israel. Let's talk about the world of sports. Army-Navy. Congratulations to Navy. Navy gets the win over Army. It's a cliche, but it's the only game that's ever played where everybody on the field or on the court, on the field at least in football, is willing to die for you. The older I get, the more impressed I am by the midshipmen and the cadets. I've been fortunate to go to Army-Navy a bunch of different years. I want to give credit to Donald Trump, who I expect will be at that game every year. He's going to be commander-in-chief again starting January 20th. He was there with J.D. Vance, with Pete Hegseth, with Tulsi Gabbard, with Elon Musk, with a lot of different individuals involved in his upcoming administration. CBS Sports showed him for 4 seconds. I timed it. They showed him saluting for 4 seconds during the national anthem. Never mentioned to my knowledge that he was there. And you might say, okay, well, that's how sports should go. Well, it's Commander-in-Chief trophy. They showed the Commander-in-Chief trophy several times. Joe Biden didn't bother to go to Army-Navy for 4 years when he was president of the United States. I would go. If I were president, I would be there every year. I give credit to Trump for being there. Shame on CBS Sports for not talking to Trump. Why not bring him into the booth? It is the Commander-in-Chief trophy. Why not acknowledge that he was there? Daniel Penny, by the way, was also there. It's a very newsworthy event. But again, it's the Commander-in-Chief trophy, and he's the Commander-in-Chief. Has been, will be. So I thought CBS Sports, which made the colossal decision stupidly not to re-up with the SEC, also did a really poor job of covering what should have been a huge part of the game that was taking place on Saturday. There's no concern about equal time. Trump can't run again. It was a story that he was there. I thought they did a poor job of covering it. I want to talk about the college football playoff. I thought the committee actually got it mostly right. If you saw my final college football playoff projections for what I thought the committee would do, I nailed it, with the exception of I had Clemson as 11 and SMU as 12. They went with SMU 11, Clemson 12. I think that was wrong. It's the only change I would have had. I'll talk about this week, the games that are going on. Ohio State hosting Tennessee, Penn State hosting SMU, Notre Dame hosting Indiana, and Texas hosting Texas is going to be hosting, it should have been SMU, Clemson, right? So all the home teams are favored. We may get weather-related issues in Notre Dame, at Ohio State, and at Penn State. I think it's starting to snow. I saw a picture from Penn State of a great deal of snow on the field there. I'll give you all my picks as we get closer. But I'm excited for those games on Friday and Saturday to all be here and see how they shake out. But that is my college football playoff analysis. Caitlin Clark, a lot of discussion about Caitlin Clark deciding to acknowledge her white privilege in a Time magazine article, and then doubling down on it by saying that she was going to speak her truth and recognizing all of the great talents that have come before her in the WNBA, many of whom are black women and all this stuff. I think it's a mess. And I think Caitlin Clark bending the knee to the WNBA is the latest example of a league being unable to handle a incredible gift that they got. They effectively have burned down the WNBA because Caitlin Clark is straight and white, and this is a league that is primarily black and lesbian. And my theory here is woke sports has lost. I don't know how many of you saw the story from Semaphore, but I'll get into that in a moment, with Kamala Harris's team acknowledging that they had major issues in the world of sports. But it felt like looking back to several years ago. And I think that's because black women are the last vestige of identity politics in America today. What do I mean by that? If you look at the 2024 presidential election, every racial group moved towards Donald Trump. He increased his vote in all 50 states and in cities because a lot of black, white, Asian, and Hispanic voters all moved in Trump's direction, particularly black men. Black women were the only group that continues to vote 90% one way and single digits the other way. Every other ethnic group is now up for grabs. In other words, you see an Asian person, you got no idea how they might have voted in the presidential race. You see a Hispanic person, you got no idea. You see a black man, 25% Trump, which is a pretty massive change. So you kind of have no idea. Certainly if you see a white person, I mean, just look at somebody, you have no idea how they voted. I think that's what should happen. Black women, though, identity politics continues to be a thing. And I think that's what Caitlin Clark is dealing with in the WNBA. And I asked you guys, hey, will her comments impact whether or not you watch the WNBA? And 70% of you said they would. And I know a lot of you, this is one thing I was wrong on. I didn't think Caitlin Clark would have a huge audience in the WNBA. I knew she had a big audience at Iowa. I thought college basketball, women's college basketball has always done well. WNBA's never made $1 in 25 years. So I thought that we would end up in a situation where the WNBA would struggle. I was wrong. Caitlin Clark brought in a whole new audience. A lot of those viewers, white men, white women. All different races, but a lot of them white men, white women, and I think a lot of them Trump voters. And so the fact that Caitlin Clark bent the knee, I think Ben Shapiro called it a land acknowledgement, basically from Caitlin Clark. It felt very 2018. Whoever advised her, I think it was an awful decision. But I think it speaks to the WNBA's inability to handle success. Suddenly people care about the overall league, and they have completely lit the league on fire. They have destroyed the golden child. They have the golden goose. They have plucked the feathers and tossed it into the bond pit and the bonfire as well. It's just a unmitigated disaster. And so I look at this, and to me, if Caitlin Clark wants to acknowledge anybody, she should be acknowledging the NBA, which is the only reason the WNBA has existed for the past 25 years, because it's never made a profit. Let me ask you this. How many businesses in America still exist that haven't made money in 25 years? I would submit to you the WNBA might be the only one. And so if you wanted to be grateful for anybody, it should be for the NBA for subsidizing a money-losing business. Instead, Caitlin Clark bends the knee to the black lesbian leadership of the WNBA, and in the process, I think has hurt her brand and I think has also hurt the WNBA. And I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen a talented athlete. The owner of the Washington Mystics was upset because Caitlin Clark was on the cover of Time magazine as the athlete of the year and said, why couldn't the WNBA, every player, have been on the cover of a magazine? That's not really how it works. I've never heard anybody in any other league be this upset over someone that has arrived in a league and created an entirely new business. A rising tide has been lifting all boats. They should be in love with Caitlin Clark. Instead, I really believe this. Because Caitlin Clark is straight and because she's white, the WNBA would rather have a black lesbian-dominated league that nobody watches than a league with multiple races and multiple sexualities that suddenly everybody cares about. And I can't think of a male equivalent. When Tiger Woods came into the PGA, and I think Tiger Woods is probably the best example, he brought a whole new audience, and everybody by and large was ecstatic. Now, there were a couple of blips in the Tiger Woods era, but by and large, everybody in golf was like, this is incredible. We're going to have a much bigger audience than we ever had before. Tiger Woods is bringing a whole new audience. He's bringing a more diverse audience into golf. And I think golf is continuing to benefit from Tiger Woods because way more minorities now care about golf than ever did before. A lot of people went out and played golf that never would have played before because of Tiger Woods. What are they doing that they aren't able to figure out a way to embrace Caitlin Clark in the WNBA? It's just maybe the most colossal failure to take advantage of an incredible new business opportunity that I've ever seen in the world of sports. They got gifted Tiger Woods, the WNBA did, because I think it's fair to say that Caitlin Clark is the Tiger Woods of women's basketball right now, the Tiger Woods of the WNBA. And instead of embracing that gift and recognizing that everybody was going to make way more money, they tore her down. WNBA had a choice. They could rise to Caitlin Clark's level and take advantage of all of the new audience that they had and recognize that everybody was going to benefit, or they could drag her down to their level. And it feels to me like they're dragging Caitlin Clark down to their level. Nobody cared before. Now they're doing it again. We'll see if this is a Bud Light moment for Caitlin Clark where she's really lit herself on fire like Bud Light did. We'll see going forward. And speaking of lighting themselves on fire, you hear now where everybody's acknowledging something that I've been talking about with you for a long time, the fact that the NBA has lit its brand on fire and completely collapsed. Suddenly, everybody's talking about the the NBA ratings being down 48% over the last 12 years. They're down 80-some-odd% since the Jordan era. Meanwhile, other sports are all elevating, the NFL in particular. And I think it's, again, this woke era, which, to the credit of most sports, it seems like every sport is now rejecting it, except the WNBA. Now, the NBA went into it more aggressively than anybody, but I think they're recognizing that they failed on a different level. I'll dive into this a bit more tomorrow, but I do think this is a story that is becoming more substantial because sports, and you may have seen me talking about this earlier on America's Newsroom, sports has overwhelmingly rejected the Democrat Party, I think to a large extent because white, black, Asian, and Hispanic men refuse to accept the lie that men pretending to be women are actually women. And I think that's why, to a large extent, Trump surged with young men. There's a story out there from Semaphore, and I was talking about this again earlier today on America's Newsroom, and I believe I have this article. The head is Kamala Harris's digital chief on Democrats losing hold of culture. And here's the opening paragraph. This again from Semaphore. Soon after Vice President Kamala Harris became the Democrat nominee, Deputy Campaign Manager Rob Flaherty turned his attention to sports. The campaign needed to introduce Harris quickly to people who aren't obsessed with politics. Sports is perhaps America's last remaining monoculture, and Flaherty and the Harris team decided to book her on sports shows and podcasts. But one by one, the biggest personalities and shows politely turned them down. Sports and culture, he says, have sort of merged together, and as sports and culture have become more publicly and sort of natively associated with this Trump conservative set of values, it got more complicated for athletes to come out in favor of us. It got more complicated for sports personalities to take us on their shows because they didn't want to do politics. Again, I think this is interesting, and OutKick.com is right behind me. Trump won the election, in my opinion, because of sports. And I do think there's also an argument that Trump and Vance are legitimately the biggest president and vice president sports fan duo that has ever been in office before. I think these guys are going to be at a lot of sporting events because men and young men in particular propelled them to the win, and I think they see it. And the Kamala team recognized it. The problem was they went with Tim Walz as their outreach to men. And I suspect that Democrats are going to be looking at this more aggressively going forward. It used to be a cliche, whichever candidate you'd rather drink a beer with would win. It's the case that Trump doesn't drink at all, so it's not like he's actually drinking a beer, but he would be fun to watch a game with. Other than maybe Senator John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, maybe Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, how many guys or gals out there would you like to watch a football game with who are Democrats? It's a major cultural issue for them. They recognized it was an issue, but they chose the wrong method by which to acknowledge it. And I don't think it's coincidental. Stephen A. Smith has got a clip going viral right now where he says, hey, a lot of what Trump said about January 6th, and there being FBI informants in the crowd on January 6th, including leading some people into the Capitol on that day. You're seeing, again, I'm like 5 or 6 years ahead of where the sports media is today. But whether it's Colin Cowherd on his show on Friday saying, hey, this is what's happened to the NBA, like the Democrat Party, they've lost their base. Now you see Stephen A. Smith saying a lot of what Trump has been saying is true. Yes, it is. And I think we're in an interesting time where many people are willing to reassess their priors. And I think it was a combo of two things happening. One, the media gaslighting everybody and saying this was the best version of Biden, that he was sharp as a tack behind closed doors. The guy can barely speak now. And I think everybody saw that on June 27th. And then they told you that Kamala was going to win, and she lost all 7 swing states, and she lost the popular vote. She gave up 312 electoral votes to Trump, the biggest win for a Republican since 1988 in the overall marketplace out there. I think that reality has turned a lot of people off. People have turned their back on MSNBC. They turned their back on CNN. And I think what's being sought is just authenticity, and all the lies being stacked on top of each other are becoming more and more significant. And even the lies are starting to cost some money. Did you see where ABC News paid $15 million to Donald Trump to endow his new presidential library? George Stephanopoulos paid $1 million and then bails on Twitter and will no longer be there. Again, all of these things are having real weight, and you're seeing a seismic cultural shift underway. I don't think it's coincidental that Jeff Bezos, that Mark Zuckerberg, that the head of the AI company, that all of them out there are giving $1 million or more to Trump for his inauguration. It's a sign of how much things have shifted and how rapidly they have. All right, a couple of sports reactions. Josh Allen, NFL MVP. Watched the game against the Lions, it should be unanimous. I know Lamar Jackson's having a good season. I know Saquon Barkley is having a good season. Heck, Sam Darnold is having a great year for the Vikings. The NFL MVP, beyond a shadow of a doubt this year, is Josh Allen. Patrick Mahomes gets the credit based on what he's done before, but Josh Allen is the best playmaking quarterback in the NFL this year. And I hope we get a Bills-Lions Super Bowl. I think it would be incredible. I'm a little bit nervous about all the injuries the Lions have had on the defensive side of the ball. Yes, they're 12-2. Yes, they would be the overall number 1 seed. But the Bills just went on the road and hung 48 points on them. Josh Allen is the NFL MVP. I think it should be unanimous. I don't think it'll be very close. Will Levis. On the day that Will Levis was drafted, I was out in Las Vegas when the Titans traded up to draft him. I was afraid they would take him in the first round. I said Will Levis is not going to have a future in the NFL. I watched every game that he played at Kentucky. I love college football. You guys know that I watch college football like crazy. Will Levis did not see the field well. He did not process information well. Those are two bad combos going forward. Yesterday, Levis threw 3 interceptions, also had a fumble, 4 turnovers in about 2.5 quarters against Cincinnati Bengals. His tenure, I believe, with the Tennessee Titans is over. Titans exist, as I've said before, basically to make me sad. I have zero optimism. I've been a season ticket holder, either myself or my dad has, for 25 years in the Titans Stadium. I already bought season tickets for the new Titans Stadium. They got to burn everything down. It's like it's done, all right? I don't have any faith in the coach. I don't have any faith in the GM. I don't have any faith in the quarterback. I don't have any faith in the organization at all right now. Will Levis isn't the answer, but he is merely a symptom of the larger failures of the Tennessee Titans franchise. Finally, I saw this story go viral. I couldn't believe it. Sydney Sweeney has a place in the Florida Keys. I like her. I watched, what's the movie, I'm going to out myself here, the romantic comedy that she did recently with Glenn Powell, set in Australia. Anyone But Him, or Anyone But You, something like that. I was on a long flight. I'll out myself. I was watching a romantic comedy. I like her, not just because she has great boobs. I think she's actually funny. I liked her in season 1 of White Lotus? Yes, she was in season 1 of White Lotus. I didn't even know who she was in season 1 of White Lotus. I didn't even realize that was her. I think she's a talented actress. I think she's really good looking. And I think she handles social media well. She had a clip of herself on Instagram where it said she was wearing a sweatshirt and it just said, "Sorry for having great tits." I think she has a really good sense of humor. There was pictures of her in her bathing suit at her house in the Florida Keys, and everybody went off on her. I don't get it. I thought she looked really good in the bikini. I think many people out there have no actual knowledge of what normal people look like in bathing suits, because we live in this Instagram era where everybody is airbrushing themselves, where everybody takes the best possible angle of themselves. I think it's BS. I defended Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift when this happened, when they were in bathing suits and everybody teed off on them. Look, unless you are a supermodel, or unless you are a married to one or dating one, I don't understand how you can criticize Sydney Sweeney. And I said in my post that we need to have a opportunity to require people out there to share pictures of themselves in a bathing suit whenever they decide to tee off on others. And I think you would see that almost never does the person taking a shot at somebody in a bathing suit look better in a bathing suit, right, than the person they're criticizing. And this is crazy, right? I don't ever, like, some people are like, oh, Sydney Sweeney's not even good looking. I'm like, who are you people? It's one thing to say, hey, I don't think Will Levis is going to be a good NFL quarterback, which is what I just said. It's another thing entirely to say, oh, I don't even think he's good at playing sports. I mean, he is in the NFL, right? He did get drafted. He's pretty talented at sports. Like, you can argue about who you think the best is in sports, but questioning the athleticism of a pro athlete is a ridiculous thing to do, which is kind of, to me, what people are doing with Sydney Sweeney. She's not even good looking. She's not even in good shape. What are you talking about? You people are bonkers. Anyway, I thought she looked amazing. I give credit to her. What you got from Adam here? NFL draft, here's what I said about Will Levis. I have zero faith in Will Levis. This was on the draft. Wasn't a top 5 quarterback for me in the SEC last year. Doesn't see the field well. Poor decision maker. I'm flabbergasted he's considered a first-round pick. So, boom, there you go. Clay Travis, NFL draft analyst. I at least made that choice. I'm consistent at least. I nailed that one. I'll be back with all of you tomorrow. I appreciate you. Again, that trip to Israel was amazing. I'm glad I got to go. I hope all of you will have a safe, Merry Christmas, happy holiday season. I'll be back all week long doing OutKick shows with you guys. And then at the end of this week, that is me out for the rest of the year. I'm going to take a couple of weeks off, travel around, and I cannot wait to do that. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP, I'm Clay Travis, and this has been OutKick, the show.